Excellent. I'll just stop the transcription. Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Well, welcome again to this webinar, A Company's Journey Towards Increased Gender Equality and Social Inclusion in the Workforce. We're very happy to have you here. We are going to make this session practical, so that's why we asked you to click on the link on the chat to participate in the Menti activities. We will go back to that. If you can keep your microphones on mute and share any reaction or question on the chat, we'll follow the chat. We'll be following up the chat. All right, so for this webinar, we will be talking about the journey of Kenergy. Kenergy is a company, a fictional company that we created based on our experience supporting dozens of companies in the energy sector to increase women's representation and gender equality in their workforces. The webinar is intended to be practical and to map how a company navigates the process of increasing and improving the conditions for women and other minorities in the energy sector in their workforces. So for companies that are interested in going through that journey, this is the webinar where we're going to map out the steps. How does that happen? And for that, we use this fictional company named Kenergy to illustrate what those steps are. And this is a webinar that is given in the context of the Energy for Equality grants, the MCA Kosovo Energy for Equality grants that aim to support companies on this journey, on their journey towards increasing gender equality in the workforce. This grants program is providing resources to implement measures to increase women's representation in the workforce and minorities' representation in the workforce, as well as other measures to create the conducive workplaces for everybody's professional growth and for the company's productivity. The grants process also is intended to support the companies by providing training, so not only resources, but also training, and support them in their assessment and action planning. All these terms, assessment, action planning, measures, that's what we're going to talk about today, so that you have a better idea of how to think about your concept note if you're thinking about sending a concept note for the grants process. Just a reminder, the open call for concept notes is currently available at our website, www.energyforequality.com. You can check it out there on the grants section. We'll put the link on the chat briefly so that you can go back and check the open call for concept notes. It's an easy process. It's something that we've designed for you to be able to quickly and easy send your concept notes. It doesn't have to be perfect, regardless of where you are in your process. We are there to support the companies that are interested in advancing gender equality in the energy sector, energy and adjacent sectors. So this is exactly what we're going to be looking at, just the steps towards the goal of increasing women's representation, for example. And just to reiterate, regardless of where you are in your journey, the Energy for Equality grants will support companies to achieve their goals. We have designed the process of applying for the concept note to be simple, and resources are on the website ready for you to check them out. Now, I will introduce Kenergy, the company that we created, fictional company. This company doesn't exist, but it's used as an example to exemplify the process and the steps that this company will take as they take actions to increase and improve increase gender equality and improve their workplace. So Kenergy is a mid-sized energy sector company. They are a Kosovo company. They import and sell smart meters for electricity measurement for domestic and commercial uses. So think about this type of company that is doing work in the energy sector, and they also do activities adjacent to the energy sector, like software development for consumption, for monitoring consumption, and they also provide services in data management. So those for electricity companies. So those activities that are adjacent to the energy sector, that's also what this company is doing. They are growing. They were founded in 2018 and are growing from 30 to 55 employees pretty quickly. And they have realized that they only have 20% of women in their workforce. People within the company have said, well, ain't this an opportunity as we grow to increase women's representation in the workforce? What about minority groups? What about people that are outside of Pristina? Can we do efforts to make our company more equitable, to make our workforce more equitable? And they are talking about it. Kenergy is trying to find ways, but they don't really know where to start. And this is what we're here for today. We're going to support Kenergy on understanding what are the steps they need to take and where to start. So step one for Kenergy to start increasing women in the workforce, the first step, and this is not very logical for some people until you see it. Normally people will think, okay, we'll start with a policy, or we'll start with a communication campaign. The first and most important step is commitment. It's very important that leadership and managers and employees at all levels are committed and engaged to taking actions and implement measures towards increased gender equality. Successful implementation and sustainability of the efforts and the measures that are implemented by a company depend on this leadership, depend on the leaders from the company to setting the depend on them setting the example and showing how they expect the gender equality efforts to advance. And it's also about how, as part of this commitment, we understand the benefits of gender equality in the workplace, including reduced turnover of employees, increased resilience. We know we're in a changing environment. Companies have been exposed to very complex situations like COVID, and it has been part of the research has shown how companies that are more diverse are also more resilient to external shocks, as well as improve the business performance. Those benefits are there for companies that are interested in gender equality, and that's also part of the drive of commitment. Not only the desire to have more women in the companies or a better representation of minority groups, it's also about the benefits for the business, about the benefits for the company, and how the company can tap into gender equality efforts in order to also improve business performance. So this is step one. And now over to you. And that's why I was insisting at the beginning on the mentee access. So please go ahead and scan this code, or click on the chat to answer the question that we're going to show. This is the question. Why do you think commitment from leaders is relevant for advancing inclusive measures in the workplace? You can use your phone and scan and tell us, what do you think are, why do you think commitment from leaders is important? What is the difference? What added value does this commitment provide? Buy-in, resources, support from staff. Yeah, review and improvement, very important for sustainability. Leading by example. Thank you very much. This is also so relevant. Accountability, right? So any efforts from any company will require leadership commitment, right? For gender equality and social inclusion purposes, this is especially relevant because it's something that is new for some people, that might need conversations, that might need complicated conversations sometimes. So that's why when leadership are committed, people have a more clear direction. People have a vision of what they are going to accomplish once they continue implementing actions towards gender equality. Thank you very much. Decision making is another one very important. So with that, I'll pass the word to my colleague, Emma. Thank you. Keep bringing the questions. We'll share this video and we'll put all the answers on the version of the PowerPoint that we will share with you all. All right, over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Mariana. All right, so thanks so much, everyone, for your great participation in the Menti. So now that Kenergy's decision makers have seen the benefits of gender equality, they understand the importance of them being engaged and supporting Kenergy's efforts to advance gender equality. They've committed resources, they've offered their support. What can Kenergy do next? What is the next step? So let's go to the next slide to see what the next step might be. So in our experience, the best next step for Kenergy to do would be to conduct an assessment. So an assessment refers to a gender equality and social inclusion assessment. And these kind of assessments are a really good starting place because sometimes companies may think, oh, you know, we want to jump in and create a new policy, or we want to, you know, institute a daycare center. They have all these great ideas, which are so important. You know, it's really great to have these wonderful and creative ideas, but it's also important to be strategic, especially when you have limited resources, you have limited staff time. We have to be strategic with where we invest our efforts to advance gender equality. So an assessment can help a company identify their current status, what gaps they may have in their workplace related to gender equality, as well as the opportunities. So this can be a really great way to kind of guide what actions the company should prioritize. We can go to the next slide, please. So I'd like to ask you, what would you recommend Kenergy assess in their assessment? What do you think they need to know to identify their gender gaps? So if you can navigate back to the Menti and you can respond to the question, we have a few options here for you to choose from. What do you think Kenergy should assess? Wonderful. Okay, we're getting some responses. Kenergy needs to know how many men, women, people from minority communities, and people with disabilities work at the company. Excellent. Looks like 2 people said that. 4 people, our leading response says Kenergy needs to assess several factors, such as the pay gap, staff distribution, and policies and practices. Okay. 0 people have said nothing. They already know that they have 20% of women representation. And 1 person says Kenergy needs to assess how gender equality measures benefit the business. Wow, this is a very interesting distribution. And in fact, this is a little bit of a trick question. Nothing is, you know, we want to assess something, so nothing is not a correct answer. But out of the other 3 options, there's really not a correct answer. There are many things that can be included in a gender equality assessment. And there are several tools that are available for looking at how you can conduct an assessment. You don't have to start this by yourself. There are tools that already exist, and you can become familiar with the different tools, the different kinds of assessments that already exist, and see what makes most sense for your company to include in its assessment. And it can include many of the things that are mentioned here: staff composition, the policies and practices. if there's a gender pay gap, the ways that gender equality measures may benefit the business. There are many different things that can be included in an assessment. So we will show some examples. If you can go back to the slide deck, Mariana, sorry for all the switching back and forth of the screens. Thank you so much. So there are some best practices for assessments that we want to share with you. These have been, congregated through research, through different efforts to conduct gender equality assessments. So just some best practices that have emerged for assessments is that it's a participatory process. So it's best if you're having conversations, if it's a participatory process that involves multiple stakeholders and that uses existing tools to identify gaps in gender equality in the company's workforce. As I said before, there are multiple different things that assessment can include. One of them is one kind of bucket is staff composition. So asking questions like, what is the staff composition at the company, broken down by job level and function. So a lot of companies may say, oh, we have a lot of women representation already, but they don't realize that maybe most of the women hired at the company are working mainly in HR or administration. So we really want to understand where these women are at the company. Are they working in administration as well as in technical positions? Are they working mainly at the bottom level? Do they also have women leaders, women in decision-making power? So we want to see where the women and other representation of minority groups are across the entire company's workforce. The next kind of bucket is policies. So asking questions like, what are the policies that the company currently has? Do the policies intentionally include measures for increased recruitment, retention, promotion, or protections for women or minority groups? And if not, maybe that's a priority area for the company. And thirdly, practices. What do women and members of other underrepresented groups feel are the barriers to advancing their career at the company and in the sector? So this can be where that participatory process comes in. Having conversations with people, focus group discussions can be a very important part of really understanding these barriers as well as these opportunities. And then there are also more objective measures, more objective tools to take to assess the good practices or processes that are in place at the company to promote gender equality. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll show some examples of different assessment tools. The first example is called the Engendering Industries Gender Equality Rapid Organizational Assessment. This is a tool that is freely available to you online, and it was developed based on experiences with over 60 companies in the energy sector globally, including some in Kosovo. So this tool you can just download it for free, and it goes through different good practices that have emerged to advance gender equality, and organizations can fill it out, selecting whether or not their organization applies this good practice. And the practices are organized according to the employee life cycle, all the way from attraction and talent outreach. So when a company first positions itself to be recruiting the best talent, recruitment, training, onboarding, all the way through retirement. In each of these different phases, there are a selection of good practices that a company can see as an entry point for gender equality. So we have the tool linked here, and when we share out the slides later, you can take a look at this tool and see if it would make sense to either use as a tool for your company or to adapt it. The next tool is the UN Women's Empowerment Principles Gender Gap Analysis Tool. And we have a short video here. If you could play the video, Mariana. I think the sound is not working, but I think it's paused. I'm not sure.
Maybe that's because Mariana, it's on mute.
Okay, I can unmute and
I think the sound is not very
Gender
important.
equality.
There we go. It's
So
working.
how can your company accelerate the pace of change? Introducing the WEPS Gender Gap Analysis Tool. It's a self-assessment tool that improves your company's ability to assess current gender equality policies and programs and identify gaps and opportunities. The WEPS tool is based on limits and boundary principles, a holistic guidance for businesses and empowering everywhere, based on the marketplace and the community. More than 190 companies have contributed to its design. WEPS Gender Gap Analysis is helping special groups and investigators listening to the citizens and
All right. Thanks, Mariana. So the sound was a little soft, but you can see that this tool helps companies identify strengths, gaps, and opportunities to improve their performance on gender equality. And it also benchmarks companies against international standards. So it's also a very useful tool to consider using when you conduct a gender equality and social inclusion assessment for your company, or you can adapt this tool. It's free, available online, and we have it linked in the presentation as well. All right, we can go to the next slide. So here, Kenergy will conduct their assessment, going back to our company, Kenergy. So they'll use one of these tools. They'll conduct an assessment, and they have discovered gaps that they need to work on. So does the journey for Kenergy end here? Are they finished? What do you think? One person says no, Kenergy is not finished. 3 people, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wow. Okay, great. We have a consensus. Kenergy is not yet finished. Already, Kenergy has done so much great work up until this point, and they've already invested a lot of resources, staff time into obtaining leadership support, into conducting the assessment, but they're still not finished. Unfortunately, they have a few more steps to go. So based on the assessment, companies may identify different priorities for actions to work on next. So this may differ for companies, but based on best practices, these are the next steps that we would recommend for Kenergy after they conduct their assessment. First would be a foundational GESI and action planning training. Next would be conducting developing an action plan. So working on action planning, looking at policies, projects, and initiatives that they could include in their action plan. Then they have to implement their action plan. Then it's also important to continually engage leaders across the company. So that first step, engaging leadership, that never really stops. That's a continuous step. Also, it's important to communicate the planned activities and planned action plan to all employees. And then finally, someone earlier mentioned accountability. That is a very important step to consider as well. So here in this step, we're going to be looking at KPIs and continued measurement and reporting. So back to our journey, we see Kenergy is now further along on their journey, but they're not quite done yet. They still, we have these recommended next steps before they reach their goal. So the step number 3, which we recommend, would be foundational training for GESI action planning. Before Kenergy can develop an action plan, it's very important for selected and strategic members of the staff to understand best practices for for enhancing gender equality and social inclusion within a company, the benefits of enhancing gender equality and social inclusion within a company, and how to make an action plan. Sometimes it's actually not so intuitive. There are many things that an action plan should include. So this training would be for those who will be designing the GESI action plan with a particular focus on managers with decision-making power. As you saw in step 1, it's very important for those who are engaged in advancing the gender equality efforts at a company to actually be able to make decisions and act on the initiatives and the activities that are selected as priority. What will the training cover? Gender equality and social inclusion concepts and relevance for the business case, as well as how to conduct an action plan. So, sorry, I think we can go back one slide, and as well as good HR and business practices for inclusive workforce development. And then we can go to the next slide on action planning. Thank you. So some best practices for action planning are that action plans should include more than just kind of the planned activities. They should, from the start, it's important to be thinking about what are the objectives for Kenergy? What's the vision at the end of all of this? You know, does Kenergy want to increase its representation from 20% women to 50% women? Or does Kenergy have another goal? So what are the objectives that have been agreed upon by Kenergy's decision makers and by its staff? Then we look at the activities. What will Kenergy actually undertake in order to achieve these objectives? And within each activity, of course, there will be tasks in order to accomplish that activity. And then there will always be a need for a budget. It's very important to be thinking about this from the very beginning so we can assess whether it's feasible, realistic, and also so that we can make requests if there are budget and other resources needed to mitigate some of the challenges that may arise during implementation related to lack of financial resources. Also, staffing and consultants. This work requires time. It requires time and energy. If the company doesn't already have a dedicated person working on gender equality, who will help support the implementation of the action plan? And finally, the calendar. What is the timeline of when we will achieve these objectives, when we will work on these activities? It's very important to set that at the beginning so that we can come back and see whether or not we have actually achieved what we set out to achieve in the time that we thought we would achieve it. It's also a good practice to validate action plans with varied groups of stakeholders within the company. So maybe, you know, a small group of people have worked on the action plan together, but then they might, you know, invite other groups of at the company to take a look at their proposed action plan, provide feedback, and make changes. This is a really important way to get multiple perspectives and make sure the action plan is more realistic and addresses the needs of all of those represented in the company. And then finally, it's really important to think about the implementation challenges that may arise when you actually set out to implement the action plan, and think about how you might mitigate some of those challenges. We can go to the next slide. Here's an example of an action plan template. This is just an example. Action plans do not need to look like this, but this is an example that has been used with many companies in the energy sector in many countries. So as I said, it includes the goal and the vision up front. It also includes gender equality interventions that the company will undertake. And these are grouped into policies, projects, and initiatives. So this is available online at the link that will be shared with you. So you can take a look at this, and this can always be adapted and tweaked to best meet the needs of Kenergy or of your company. You can go to the next slide. So here are some illustrative actions or measures that could be included in the action plan related to policies. And of course, these are just examples. There are so many different policy-related initiatives that could be included. in the action plan that can advance gender equality. But some examples are a gender policy or equal opportunity or recruitment policy, an equal pay policy to avoid a salary gap, an anti-harassment policy, a flex time and home office policy, policies addressing care responsibilities, including paternity leave, childcare, and elderly care, HR or development policy with equal career path management support, a back to work policy. So once someone leaves the workforce to have children, for example, how do they reintegrate and reskill when they come back to the workplace? And then finally, gender equality certification, such as an EDGE certification, a UN gender equality seal. So these are also steps that a company can undertake to be seen as a more gender-friendly company if they have this certification. Next slide, please. And another kind of bucket of potential activities that could be included in the action plan are projects. So again, here are some examples of activities or measures that could be related to projects to be included in the action plan. A transportation program, so having vehicles or standing contracts with transportation service providers, leasing of vehicles or financial support for safe transportation. This is especially important when we have shift work in the energy sector and we have people working in the late shift at night. They may not feel safe walking to and from their workplace at those late night hours and may not have access to safe transportation. So this is an example of an activity that could support with that. Changing rooms and bathroom facilities. We've seen many companies in the energy sector only have one changing room or one bathroom. They don't have separate changing facilities or bathrooms for both men and women. Lactation rooms to support working mothers, daycare facility or monetary support for childcare, software and platforms for remote learning, IT equipment to enable home office, such as laptops and similar, systems or equipment for monitoring of flex time, and lastly, software and IT platform for gender equality database and monitoring system. Next slide, please. And lastly, a third bucket of measures that support gender equality are called initiatives. So here are some examples of initiatives that could be included in the action plan. But of course, these are examples, and there may be so many, additional creative initiatives that companies can think of that are suited and tailored for their needs and based on what comes out of the assessment that they conduct. So the first is internships, and it's good practice for internships to be paid to allow for more equitable participation in internships. So internships which include at least 6 months salary, as well as mentorship programs, training and skills qualifications, advocacy activities, such as promoting role models, gender sensitivity and inclusivity campaigns, leadership programs, setting up internal or external networking initiatives, reskilling training, and scholarships. Next slide, please. So another step that Kenergy can undertake after they've developed their action plan is to communicate about the planned activities to the staff. So best practices for communication about the planned activities include strategic communication both up and down. So making sure that leadership, those who are, at the top, the management, are constantly aware of the planned activities and that they're supportive. And then also communicating to all staff at all levels. So making sure that staff at all levels are aware of the planned activities, aware of how they can get engaged, how they can support, and just so that they know what's going on, and it can help them feel more comfortable with their company, can help improve retention rates if staff are aware that their company is undertaking initiatives to advance gender equality. It's important to focus on supporters and what we may call influencers. So it can be tempting to want to engage in communication or debate with those who may not support gender equality or those who may not be aware of the benefits of gender equality. But it's good practice to be more strategic and focus mainly on working with and communicating with those who demonstrate that they support. And they may not have all the knowledge at this point, but at least if they're supportive, then they may be interested in learning. These people are more likely to be able to convince others. So you don't need to be the mouthpiece who's working so hard and expending all your energy to convince everyone of the benefits of gender equality. If you focus on communicating the benefits to those who support, as well as those who are what we may call influencers. So if we think about people who have a lot of social power or social influence, who may be leaders in the organization, these people, once you can get them on board, will be able to convince others. It's also important to explain the goals and vision to all staff so they're aware of what the company is trying to achieve and that it's clear. There's no confusion about, some people may think, oh, the company wants, only women, and it may scare them. So we want to communicate the goals and vision, which is for Kenergy to be a gender-friendly company and to have a more diverse workforce. And we also want to make it relatable. So tying back to the benefits of gender equality that Mariana was mentioning earlier, we want to communicate the activities that are planned for gender equality in a way that people will understand the benefits and relate to, understand why the company is undertaking these activities. So we can go to the next slide. So the next step is accountability. Someone mentioned this earlier, and it is a very important step. How do we make sure that we are measuring whether or not we have successfully implemented our action plan, whether or not we have successfully advanced gender equality at Kenergy? So there are several good practices related to accountability, such as developing a structure or a task force or working group who can track the implementation of the action plan. If the company does not have it already, it can be important and effective to make a case to hire someone who is in charge of implementing the strategy and tracking its success. And then finally, from the inception of the action plan, it's important to develop a plan for measuring and tracking the success and making changes as necessary. So setting out indicators. How will you measure the success? Will you know you're successful when you've reached 30% representation of women, for example? These are different measures that you can track and measure along the implementation of the action plan to see if it's successful or not. If you find that you are not reaching the targets that you've set out, you can go back and perhaps edit the action plan, maybe go back to step one and re-engaging leadership, finding out where those blockages are happening so that you can best set yourself on the right course again. So I will pass the word back to my colleague Mariana to talk about what's next for Kenergy.
Thank you, Emma. So finally, in this journey towards increased gender equality, it's important to acknowledge that this is a long-term work, and companies that are interested in making this journey, it's important that it's also considered that throughout the process of implementing, we're constantly reassessing, we're constantly tweaking the action plan according to the results that Emma just mentioned. Doing that process is an iterative process that requires continuity, and that's why it's also so important to have the leadership commitment. And now I want to bring us back to thinking about the grants process. All this information that we have shared is relevant for companies that are either interested in the grants opportunity that is currently open with the MCA Energy for Equality grants activity, or for those that might not be ready but are interested in learning. This is also relevant for all of you. So now we want to get to this, to the question, okay, so if I'm interested in the grants, how might Energy for Equality grants support the companies in their journey for advancing gender equality and social inclusion in the workplace? How does Energy for Equality can support you? With a quick raise of hands, can people share who of you are planning to send a concept note or are considering participating in the grants? Quick show of hands. You can, if you can leave your hand raised and instead of lowering it, yeah, okay. It's lowering automatically, but I've seen 4 or 5 interested people. Okay. Excellent. So it's important. New people are coming. Okay. Interesting. I see the hands raising. Some of the hands are lowering. So but there is indeed interest. So the question here that we want to answer is how might Energy for Equality support those companies that are in the grants program to navigate this journey. So we want to bring back to the Energy for Equality grants process. You know, we mentioned it, and you're here as part of the registration process for all the grants activities, so we know you're familiar with it. But just as a reminder, MCA Kosovo will provide grants to advance women's representation and their careers in the energy sector. And this means all the
Mariana,
things.
sorry to interrupt. We're
Yes.
losing you. We're not hearing you well. So we didn't hear these last sentences.
Oh, is that better?
It sounds like
now
there
it's
is
better.
an issue with your computer microphone, Mariana. If you want, I can take over
Yeah, it's
the
noisy.
slide. Sorry.
Okay.
I think you were mentioning about the support that the grants will provide. So we mentioned that the there's projects, policies, and initiatives are very important for a company to advance gender equality. So the grants will support some of the illustrative examples that I shared earlier related to policies, projects, and initiatives. And it will support these activities which promote gender equitable practices among energy and adjacent sector employers. The Energy for Equality grants team will also provide technical assistance to help increase the representation of women and women from ethnic minority communities and energy companies in Kosovo. So if you apply for a concept note and you're shortlisted, we are also going to support you along the way by providing training and technical assistance to help you design a program which will best benefit your company in terms of achieving greater gender equality and representation of women from ethnic minority communities, as well as how you can see these gender equality benefits applied in your company. And the project will also support networking, mentoring, and other educational and learning opportunities for women. And the final aim of the grants program is to increase women's employment, retention, and promotion in the energy and adjacent sector workforce. So here you can see again. Go ahead, Mariana.
Apologies, let me know.
It sounds like your sound is better if you want to take back over. Actually, I'm hearing an echo.
Maybe a few minutes.
Is that better? Yes. Okay. So Thank you very much, Emma, for taking over. As Emma was mentioning, the Energy for Equality grants aims to support the companies in the different processes. And I think some of the very important things to think about as you are thinking of your concept note is on the steps that we just provided, right? So the step one, the leadership commitment. If you already have some leadership commitment, if you're already thinking that this is important, then you're probably ready to send a concept note. Don't forget that the deadline is November 29th. The assessment step that Emma explained is one of the steps that we will support the grantees to take, as well as the training. So if you submit a concept note and your concept note is selected, you will receive support to develop your assessment and your action plan. Through training, this will require commitment on the side of the company, but also the benefit of having the assessment and having the training for your team. These green steps are for those that send concept notes. After the concept note process, grantees will be invited to send a full application. And for those that are selected after the full application, resources will be available in the form of a grant that companies can use to finance the measures that Emma was just talking about. Those measures that we discussed for policies, practices, projects. Maybe it's useful if we go really quickly to those slides. These are the things that we're thinking that grants can support with, right? So as you navigate our website and take a look at the concept note opportunity, you can check what are those actions that you think you may be interested in implementing in your company, and that way you can start developing your concept note. And based on those actions that you propose in your concept note is that the full application process will be, those are the measures that in the full application will be considered for funding. So your grants will fund those actions. So by this point, the support from the program is in the actual grant. Before being selected after the full application, before that, you'll still have benefits if you send your concept note, like being part of the assessment and the training. And finally, for the steps 5 and 6, engaging leaders across the company and the communication and accountability, companies that are selected for a full application and after the full application, they will report on how their efforts are going, and they will get support to navigate the change and implement their action plans. So if you are a potential grantee, if you're thinking of sending a concept note, this is what it looks like within the process and the steps that we explained. So I hope this slide closes on the ideas of how grantees can participate in this full journey following the example of Kenergy, and that is easier for everybody to understand how the grants activity program that MCA is promoting, how you will be participating in that. These are basically the steps that we're going to get through with the grantees. There. Now I see there is a hand, maybe some questions. So please go ahead and put your questions on the chat and also share. I want to thank our MCA colleagues for being here as well. Please feel free to add anything you may want to add or answer questions as they come up. We're very happy to have everybody here. I'm going to open my camera, hoping the bandwidth will hold. Lendita, I saw you had your hand raised. Please feel free to open your mic and make the question. Okay, we have.
No, it was raised before. It was raised before, not now. I was previously on that question when I raised my hand. I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
There's a question from Blerta in the chat.
Thank
According
you. It
to
says,
the, yeah,
Mhm.
go ahead.
According to the eligibility criteria, Tier 1 says must be registered for energy generation, energy transmission, energy distribution, energy supply, energy efficiency, or other adjacent sector activities. I have been offering energy efficiency services under 7112, energy engineering activities and related technical consultancy, 7111, architectural activities, specialized design activities. Is there a specific business service that you're looking for according to the energy efficiency services, as there are no specific codes in the ARBK register for this type of service? I'll give you a quick answer for this, but please feel free to send this question. We will also share answers to these questions in writing. I'm going to go to the website where we have a frequently asked section. And here we are sharing some similar questions about eligibility. So please go ahead and check this out, and we will post the direct answer to this question here as well. I want to go to the Notice of Funding Opportunity, the concept note, the document, and I want to show you where you can find the eligibility for adjacent sectors. So if you go to Annex A, Annex 1, this is the list of energy sector activities that are eligible for, these are the adjacent sectors activities that are eligible for grants. So if you fall into any of this, please go ahead and do your concept note and just check this annex and take a look at, there are several items that you can consider as adjacent sectors, or several activities that we can consider as adjacent energy sector. So go ahead and check it out. If you're in that list, you're likely to be eligible. The other point that I wanted to make is concept notes are designed to be easy for you. So go ahead, and they don't have to be perfect. The purpose of this process of having the concept note and then having assessment and training and all those things is for us to also be able to support you in the process of defining the full application. So don't feel it has to be perfect. Go ahead and send your concept note, and we will let you know what needs to be strengthened throughout the process. Thank you, Vesa. Please go ahead. Vesa, I think you're muted. If you're, but please, if you want to share anything, go ahead and unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you, Mariana. I think your answer, you covered almost everything, but just to answer to Gleda's question more specifically, I think energy efficiency is in the list. So if you have been providing energy efficiency services, I think there's somewhere consultancy on energy efficiency or something like that, then I think the way how you're describing it, you are eligible. But we will also take this question, as Mariana mentioned, and publish it also officially with the answer.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. Please don't forget to check out the website. You can go to energyforequality.com grants. There you can see all the information. If you click on apply now, you have a detailed explanation of the steps and the templates to use for your concept note. And here you have the full document where you can find the list of adjacent sectors. This presentation will be uploaded also on the website and for you to share or revisit as you are working on your concept notes. Thank you. A special thank you to Emma Edwards for the presentation today.
Thank you, Mariana. Thanks everyone for your participation.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.